So I just want to say thank you very much, everybody, for coming here tonight. We really appreciate it. We know it's hard in the middle of the week, and especially when you're not really sure what you're coming for, or you might not. I know some of you know me, but not all of you do, and sort of none of you know Dr. Rudi. And it's talking about something that might seem really far away to us at the moment. So we do really appreciate you taking the time to come here tonight. It is a special opportunity. I've got to say it's not normal that someone who has to get special permission from their government to leave their country during war that puts Cairns on their itinerary. So you can thank me for that. So we are very privileged and blessed to have Dr. Rudi with us tonight, and you'll hear a little bit more about why that is. So thank you for coming. I do know there were quite a few more people that talked about coming and maybe for different reasons haven't been able to make it. Hopefully after tonight you'll see that they missed out. And thank you very much to Simon Pankhurst, who's from Seek Media, who has kindly offered to film for us tonight. So we would hopefully have something that you can share with others as well. So for those of you who don't know, my name's Lara Wheeland and I'm a doctor in far north Queensland. So I mostly work in remote Cape York and have done for a long time, including with some people here. And the reason I'm involved in this is because last year in July, I had the opportunity to go to Ukraine, and it was in connection with the Christian Medical Association of Ukraine. Long story how that happened, but I ended up sort of being over there and was kind of more looking around and doing video interviews with people. So I had the opportunity to travel around the country during war and meet lots of people affected by it, take their stories, and also see the amazing work of some of the organisations that are really trying to make a difference during this really difficult time, including CMA, Christian Medical Association of Ukraine, which is Dr. Rudi's organisation. So just a little bit of background, and apologies if you know some of this already, but one thing that we have found, because we've been travelling for quite a while, but this is the end of the itinerary, so Rudi's been in Canberra, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and one thing that we have found is that in Australia, this is an issue that's sort of really dropped off the radar. It's not making the news much. In fact, a lot of people sort of say, oh, is the war still going on? Oh, I didn't realise. So I do give a little bit of background. So for those of you who don't know, Russia invaded Ukraine on February the 24th, 2022. That was the second time. They'd already invaded in 2014 and captured large areas of territory. So since then, large areas have been liberated, but not without fierce battles, and that a lot of atrocities have been uncovered in those areas that are now deoccupied. There are still about 20% of the country is occupied by the Russians, and there's a long front line where very intense battles are ongoing, and relentless missile attacks that are going on every day. And certainly in the beginning of the war, there was a lot of attacks on infrastructure. When we first got there, I went with a colleague, and we met people who hadn't had power for months and months and months, even in big cities. So you can see this blacked out map. That was a satellite picture of Ukraine at night at the beginning of the war. So you can see there was just no power and people were operating by torchlight and so forth. So there's also been millions of refugees, millions of internally displaced people, and this is ongoing. Of course, as a doctor, I'm aware of the massive impact that all of this has had on the health system. And there's mines everywhere. There's been a dam that was bombed by the Russians in June last year, and that caused massive damage as well, but I'll talk more about that after. So whilst I was there, I was able to go with some of the volunteers who were going out to the villages that had been bombed, occupied and then liberated. A lot of people had started to come back to these deoccupied villages, even though it's not 100% safe yet. So, we could still hear explosions and see shelling. A lot of these were difficult to get to on sort of, bumpy roads that had been damaged by warfare. It took several hours to drive to some of these. And I was just amazed to see how resilient people were. And, a lot of these people were farming people, living sort of semi-self-sufficient rural lifestyles, which appeals to me because I do that. But they were just living this lovely life, and then one day like that, everything's destroyed. And we saw, them living in makeshift shelters, cooking outside. Okay, in summer that's not so bad, but now it's below freezing, so I can't imagine how tough that is. And, their fields were destroyed, and there were, shrapnel everywhere. A lot of them were mined, so they couldn't even use the fields. They couldn't irrigate their fields because there was no water, thanks to the blowing up of that dam. And as you can imagine, medical care in these areas would be very difficult. And a lot of the medical care in the areas I went to is being provided by mobile clinics, which is one of the projects that Rudi's organisation, Christian Medical Association, does. And they do these under really difficult conditions. So the village that we went to do the clinic, and people were so grateful for the care. And that village, 2 weeks after I left, was bombed and a person was killed. And then another few weeks later, the actual clinic we'd been in was bombed and a paramedic was injured. And then I've counted since that at least 6 times that village has been bombed in the last few months. So, these people are going through really tough times. They're very tough, but you didn't have to scratch far below the surface to see tears and trauma, and obviously a lot of psychological support's going to be needed as well. So I mentioned the blowing up of the dam, and I mentioned this specifically because this was kind of a little bit of a blip on our news. And, as an Aussie, you might imagine the little farm dam with a couple of roos sitting by it. But this is a massive dam. This is 250 kilometres long. And that's after the bombing, and you can see it's just completely drained. It has a massive impact. So thousands of villages and towns had no water. I was in one of those villages where we stayed for a couple of days. I wasn't allowed to have a shower. We had to bring our own water to scoop into the toilet and to drink. And it's caused massive amount of damage. And it's, this is ongoing. So farmers who can't irrigate their fields, villages without water, fish kills, people not able to wash properly and getting infections. Contaminated land, landmines washed down, and a lot of people were killed in the flooding. So children, as you can imagine, are greatly affected by war. And I just play this video for a couple of reasons. One, if you just have a think about what's going on, that these kids have to react like this, and don't worry, nothing gruesome, but so to give context, this is someone's pulled out their mobile phone. A missile's just struck a hotel in a park, a civilian area, and so of course everyone pulls out their phones and starts filming, and then this is what happens.
Ребята, только что на наших глазах. Мы здесь на набережной стоим. На Радуге свист. Ракета летит. Еврейкерс. Во имя Иисуса Христа. Боже! Ракета! Во имя Иисуса. Роман Алайдис. Смотрите, что происходит. Тихо, все. Не плачьте. Рабадала. Смотрите, что происходит. Стой!
And just so you know, this is what they call a double tap. So this has happened quite a lot. So they'll hit a place with a missile, give enough time for the rescuers to come in and the ambulance and everything to arrive, and then hit it again so they can kill the rescuers. So obviously there's going to be a lot of need for psychological support for kids. Some of them have witnessed bombings, shootings, they've lost loved ones. Some kids have been kidnapped and tortured and raped. So obviously lots of trauma. And we met kids whose parents told us about how they would wake up screaming at night at the slightest sound, would get them crying and screaming. This little girl here in the middle, her name's Adelina, and her mother was pregnant with her in 2014 in Donetsk when the Russians first invaded, and she had to flee when she was pregnant with her. And she moved to Bakhmut. And so then when the Russians invaded in 2022, she had to flee again, and this time she was pregnant with Adelina's little sister. So twice she'd had to flee from Russian invasion, and now her family are refugees, a family of 5 in a one-room apartment that someone's helped them with, in 5 of them on one bed. So, but you know, there's good news stories too. I met organisations that are doing great work with these kids. I mean, the need's immense, but there are people trying to do stuff, play therapy, art therapy, and you know, Rudi's organisation is often supporting a lot of these different organisations and working with them. And I do like to show this because it just gives you a bit of an idea. So this is some of the paintings that I took photos of at one of the centres where the children have come in and they first paint what they've seen and experienced. So I think you can sort of get the idea. And this one in the top left that says Shkola, that's Ukrainian for school. So, you know, showing their school being attacked by tanks and bombs. And then after a month or so of being in the refuge and having this therapy, they're painting things like this, which is much nicer, and they're quite artistic too. So, of course, you can imagine that, you know, there's huge humanitarian needs, but there's also been a huge response. So one thing I was really impressed with was how everywhere I went, Ukrainians were like just getting in there and doing what they could to, you know, to help, to volunteer, distributing aid, helping refugees, you know, driving equipment to different places. And certainly people are really trying to help themselves. They want help, they need help, they're asking for help, but they're not just sort of sitting there saying, oh, please help us. So in fact, Ukraine has come 3rd in the world just a month ago or something for the percentage of their income that they give to charities out of their own pocket, and this is the country that's being attacked. So, you know, many of the churches that we saw were involved in a lot of this. You know, they were often doing a lot of the dangerous work, driving things out to, you know, dangerous areas, you know, taking humanitarian aid. Rudi's organisation, CMA, does an amazing job with all of that stuff and supports a lot of the smaller organisations and volunteers that are doing those things. We also met people who were working with orphanages and vulnerable children in institutions. Again, one of them is partnered with Rudi's organisation and gets support from them. And, you know, this is really important too because a lot of these institutions are now overflowing because they've had to evacuate from the east where the war is, you know, the hottest and come to the west. And so it's really stretching resources. And these children are particularly vulnerable to the Russian kidnappings. So more than ever, they need people to advocate for them and work with them. So, and like I said, I think one thing that really impressed me about Rudi's organisation, CMA, was how much they sort of plugged into a lot of these really good, you know, smaller organisations or volunteers or individuals and chaplains and churches and stuff that were doing great on the ground work. So it just meant that they worked really effectively and efficiently. So as I mentioned, it's a massive refugee crisis. In fact, it's the biggest refugee crisis since World War II. So we got to interview lots of refugees and those helping them. Again, fantastic organisations and churches that were opening their doors. There, you know, still places where there's just mattresses everywhere and bunk beds and people living there who've lost their homes. And this lady here, we heard lots of stories, and I know all these stories, but I'm not going to spend time doing that. You need to hear more from Rudi. But this lady here was telling us how she jumped on a train at 3 o'clock in the morning when the bombing started and had no idea where the train was going. Everyone was just jumping on, didn't know where she'd got off, and thankfully there was some people from this church who were waiting there to help her and took her to the refuge. Her children and her grandchildren are still in occupied areas. She has no idea what's happened to them. She hasn't heard from them for 18 months, but she was just grateful to have a place to stay there and was trying to be a grandma to the other refugee kids. So I got to obviously speak to many doctors, and I guess the story of David really stuck with me. So he's a young neurosurgeon at one of the bigger hospitals that receives patients from the front line. So he's doing you know, lots of night shifts. He told me he was doing 3 to 4 major brain surgeries a shift, taking bits of artillery shells out, 13 to 15 patients a day in their hospital. And, you know, it was really tough on him, but he knew that he had to keep going. And obviously they need lots of support. They need, you know, he's very experienced, obviously now, sadly, but and very intelligent, good doctor, but there's, sort of gaps, things they need upskilling with, they need probably more hands. And again, another one of the wonderful projects that CMA does is and that's what we've been doing on this trip, is trying to connect with some specialists and surgeons and that might be able to come and help. So, and the medical and nursing staff are just going through so much, and the medical aid that CMA supplies is just a godsend for them. You can see some ladies here from Bakhmut, have to wear the helmets and this gear, but they don't abandon their posts. They're there for their people and they get support. There's all the boxes of aid they get from CMA. So, don't worry about reading too much of that. It's just to make the point that, the medics, so like combat medics and paramedics, are also working under really difficult conditions, and, the soldiers are just can't even imagine it. There's a desperate need for a lot of the first aid gear, and that's another thing that CMA has helped with, getting some very important life-saving equipment, but also making sure that people have the education and training to use it properly, and so that it's used effectively. And and just a reminder, not that I think it matters. I think just if you're a professional soldier, you're still a human being with a soul and family and whatever. But as Rudi's reminded me, so many of these soldiers are not professional soldiers. They're people who just before the war were teachers and doctors and builders and farmers, and who just their families were killed in a missile strike or something, and they're just like gone to fight. So they're losing the best of them. So, the injuries that are happening to these guys is obviously having a massive impact on society. And, we met a lot of guys at, rehab centres, and we saw them in the streets. And this guy here, my colleague saw him in a rehab centre, and a week later we ran into him in another part of the country. And we're like, what are you doing here? And he said, well, I just got out of rehab and I have 2 days with my wife and then I'm back to the front. And I was like, wow, that's a bit rough. And but it was by choice. And he's French and this guy's Swedish, and they wanted to go back. And we said, why? It's not even your country. And they said, because you don't understand. This is not about Ukraine. This is about freedom and democracy. And this is about the world. It's about all of Europe. So, that was interesting. And this guy here that I got to interview, and I'm sorry that poor Rudi has to see this every time because he's a close friend of Rudi's, but he was amazing. He was an army chaplain who embeds with his unit, and he had a few days leave and had been invited to the CMA camp where the guys were having a bit of a retreat. For many of them, the first time since the war, they were having a break. And he came along. They were hoping he would get a break too. But he was going every day to a funeral of one of the guys, 6 guys in his unit who'd been killed. And it was really quite heavy on him. I'm really thankful that even though it was a really tough time for him, he allowed me to interview him. I managed to get an hour-long interview where he said some really profound and wise things that I think people really should listen to. And you can... on our brochures, our website, you can go through to our YouTube channel, and I've put it up there with permission of his friends and family, and it's worth watching. So, and I really felt like that was meant to be. So I had that amazing interview with him, and sadly the next day he was killed in a car accident on the way to another funeral. So, as well as Mark, I got to meet lots of other army chaplains, and they're particularly amazing. And I know that CMA often works through a lot of these guys as well. They just have, an amazing reach. They often are the ones who, as well as working with like their army unit, they're also the only ones brave enough to drive a car full of aid to, front lines where there might be elderly people still living who haven't been able to move or didn't want to move. So they're a really great way to deliver some aid to those really tough places where you literally risk your life to get there. So I'm sorry, but not sorry. I have tried to cover the worst part, so hopefully I'm not going to give anyone nightmares, I don't think. But the reason I do this, it's not to be sensational or whatever, but I think this is really important because I think in addition to all the usual impacts of war, it's important to understand what Russian occupation means for people in Ukraine. So where they've liberated areas, they've uncovered some horrendous atrocities. So mass graves, basements full of bodies. Some of you may have heard of Bucha, that happened earlier in the war. A pile of women who'd been raped and set alight. And one of the young guys who was volunteering with a church down south that I'd visited, he was translating for me, and he was only 20-something, and he told me he's from Bucha. And he said he wasn't there when the occupation came, but his friends were, and 4 of them were killed. And another one was there when it was liberated and took some photos for evidence. And he came across a basement. And as this young guy is trying to explain to me the photo he saw, he was just shaking. I've never seen anyone so traumatised. And I said, you don't have to tell me. He said, no, I do. I have to tell you. And he said, my friend saw a pile of bodies, and on the top was a naked 9-year-old girl who'd been raped by the Russian soldiers. And the reason I tell you this is because there's a real narrative at the moment that Ukrainians should be negotiating, they should be giving some of their territory, they should just let Putin take whatever he wants just to end this thing. But this is what that means. So Ukrainians will tell you they do not have a choice. They will, if nobody helps them, that's fine. They're just going to keep fighting till the death because they can't live like this. No one wants to live like this. Death is better. And I always just briefly mention this, and because it kind of ties in with the other thing, is because there is a lot of misinformation and disinformation out there. So sometimes it's just because it's not on the news, and it's just that's normal. People get tired of things and the next thing comes along. But it's also an active strategy of the Russian government. So that's well documented. They spend billions of rubles on disinformation campaigns, on buying journalists and politicians and trolling on social media. Part of that is like trying to get people to think, well, Ukrainians are actually Nazis and Putin's are rescuing people, and, Putin's this saviour of family values and all these other, complete garbage. And so you get people sort of saying to Ukrainians, well, you need to negotiate. Like, just, it's all your fault, actually, So it is really important to just think twice about what you hear. This is obviously more and more of an issue as we have more and more social media and AI and things like that. So I'm not saying that, I know the truth about everything, but if something doesn't seem quite right, or you're not sure, you just want to check, or you want to share it, just look around a bit, and I'm not saying you have to go looking in secret places, just Google like hoax or debunk and then whatever the topic is, and you'll find there's probably some reputable, site that's done a bit of an analysis of it for you. So I'm not going to talk about what Rudi's organisation does, because he's here, you can hear it from the horse's mouth. But I just want to say, though, and the reason I've put this up here is to prompt me to say that the reason that our small NGO, and I have a couple of our members here and people who've worked alongside us for many decades with working with Indigenous children, and then we've supported work in Bangladesh. The reason that we've pivoted now to support Rudi's organisation as an Australian partner is because of what I saw, because I believe in the cause. I believe in that we need to support what's going on. We need to support our brothers and sisters in Ukraine. We need to stand alongside them. And I believe in their organisation because I saw with my own eyes their accountability, effectiveness, efficiency, but also the love and care that they do their work with. So that's what we do now, is we have a mechanism so that Australians can get a tax deductible donation by going through our small charity, and we pass it directly to Ukraine. We're just all volunteers, so we don't take admin fees or anything, and we make sure we do all the hard paperwork trying to get to a war-torn country so that other people don't need to worry about that. So Rudi, again, we'll talk more about this, but I guess there's a few things. If you feel it's something you'd like to help with, or you're talking to someone and they go, oh, I wish I knew how to help, raise awareness, contact politicians. As a country, we could be doing a lot more to support Ukraine. There's some big things you can do. There's other big things that Rudi can talk about. If you know doctors or specialists or OTs or physios or whatever that want to do some, volunteer work or go as teams, do some teaching, you can talk to Rudi. And of course, donations are very important. They need, you know, money to keep running and to keep doing the things they do. Money goes further there than it does here, so it doesn't need to be big amounts. We have some jewellery, handmade jewellery that we've made just to try and raise a little bit of money. So if you want to give gifts, you can buy some jewellery and tell people that it's supporting Ukraine. There's a little card that you can have with it, so you can show people where it's going to. We have a blog that you can sign up to sort of keep informed, and we try and let you know what's going on and get it direct from the people in Ukraine that we're talking to almost daily. And the other thing that we encourage people to do is just to consider, because I've got to say, even though I've run a charity for a couple of decades, I'm still haven't quite got comfortable with asking for money yet. But I just need to remind myself what it's for. And I know that it's tough. I know costs of living are going up, and I know that so many people are already giving to a lot of different things. But even if it's only a small amount that you can spare, if it's the cost of a cup of coffee per week or per month or whatever, it still helps, because I guess our thoughts are that if we can get, 200 people to give a tiny amount each month, that still adds up to something. And it can really multiply, because something I've learnt on this trip travelling with Rudi is just how much it can be multiplied. So for example, whilst we've been travelling, the NHS has rung up Rudi, and because even though he's just the Christian Medical Association of Ukraine, it started as a small volunteer organisation, but now they're so trusted that people from all over the world contact them as an avenue to give to Ukraine. And the NHS has said, hey, we've got 20 lorries full of brand new medical equipment from COVID times that we never used, and you can have it for free. Oh, but you need to pay for the logistics. So each one's like $4,000 to do the full, getting it to Ukraine and then distributing it. So seems like a lot, and it is, but if everyone puts in a little bit, and then that means that a lorry full of medical aid that's worth millions of dollars that will save a lot of lives in Ukraine and can be distributed by people who can give it with love and care, can be delivered for that small amount of money. So that's really made me think about how it can be multiplied. So and I guess with that, I will hand over to Dr. Rudi, who's come all the way from Ukraine, has needed special permission to leave the country as a military-age male, but because of the important aid work he does, he's allowed to do that.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, thank you so much. We're going to have time of question and answers, but I'm going to go quickly through presentation so you can understand what we are doing a little bit more. And then you can be able to ask any question that you would like to ask. So CMA was created in 1991, and I became a president 4 years ago. And this is a better part of me, our family, my wife, and here is not a 3-year-old and 3-year-old son. Today his birthday, and and psychology telling if I'm going to show you my family, you're going to like me more. Done. We have 6 projects. Actually 7. Just recently we added mental health support for chaplains, train the trainer programs, because it's so important. And we're going to train 120 chaplains that will cover or take care about more than 50,000 soldiers. Each chaplain taking care about, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So each chaplain cover more than 5,000 soldiers. So it's a massive impact, and soldier can have Abrams, Bushmasters, everything. But if they don't have motivation, if they're broken, they're gonna die. And opposite, if they have motivation and they don't have Abrams, they can resist, stand, and fight. But those 6 projects that I'm going to present you today, this is how started my volunteer job, mobile clinics, and especially during the war, they are precious and needed in deoccupied territories to refugees, because they don't have money enough. Economy, I know the pressure on the whole world. But pressure on our economy of Ukraine is much worse. We didn't have great economy before the war. And right now, all prices are doubled or tripled. Salaries are not. Fuel that costs 23, 28 hryvnias doubled to 60. The same with currency of dollar. Poland blocking our border, making impossible international export-import. And it's pretty tough. IT specialists that work all over the world for different companies, they don't want to hire any more Ukrainians because, oh, you have electricity cutoffs, you have the war there. And it doesn't matter that every IT specialist had their own generator bought for $2,000 each, the Starlink, and it's independent. But because it's security, it's unsureness, so we better not hire Ukrainians. We can work with Russians, but we don't want to work with Ukrainians. And it's extremely economical pressure, unbelievable. And additionally, constant attack on civilian infrastructure, building houses that should be rebuilt, reconstruct. And when we're talking about mobile care or mobile medical clinics, when we are given to the people who are not, they ready to buy Frappuccino, but they can't afford their regular chronic disease treatment. No, it's people that barely live, and they usually live from humanitarian help, and they don't have access to pharmacy, or they have access to pharmacy, but they don't have money for it, or they're just one older man and all village is destroyed and there's no doctor just to talk with him. So it's amazingly supportive and we're gonna one of my messages. We are doing everything. We're Ukrainian. We're doing everything what we can, and this project is proof of it. All doctors are volunteers. They're not being paid. They sacrifice their vacation or Saturdays, Sundays to serve those people. And all that we're trying to ask, please help us to survive. Help us to fight against this evil. And we are screaming already and asking people, not because of us, but because of you. Because of you, because this evil will spread all over the world. And we are begging and screaming to people, just hear us out. Because we're doing always what we can. But they will come to your countries, they will invade your countries, and you will not be ready for it. And we're already dying, but we're ready to die and fight with them, with your support. So, and this is a proof. This is not just my words or beautiful presentations that prepared. This is real job that is being done by those amazing doctors. And we are asking other people to be involved from other countries. And people are extremely supportive. A Taiwanese group that flew from different part of the world. And they became very famous because we're trying to do our job as best as possible. And they brought a media team, the biggest TV channel in Taiwan, and they showed it. And president of Taiwan, after they came back, asked them for audience, and they shared about Ukraine and what they saw and lessons that they took. Because as a discoverer, we trained them at something, not how to give better medical help, but how to do better medical missions. Because they were usually doing just simple missions, all teams coming, helping, and going away. But we said, no, let's train our doctors. So your impact, you will see less patient, but your impact is going to be enormous. We're going to remember you much more and grateful to your support. Not just you're going to see 100 or 1,000 patients, but you're going to train our doctors to be better doctors as they're going to see 100,000 patients. And the government of Taiwan said, make offer. And as after conversation with Ministry of Health of Ukraine, we discovered, and we know it because we have a lot of friends in burns unit, and it's huge catastrophe. If you're going to get more than 50% of the body burns, the probability of survival less than 20%. And we ask big budget, 1.9 million, but they approved. And right now we are not only purchasing, by the way, one of the best skin in the world produced in Australia, and we ask your government to help us with this, to buy from you, so we will be able to give it to our patient. And we're going to train them. We want to train them. We want to control successful outcome. And there's hundreds children, all course military, but a lot of civilians that trap in the after explosions of drones and rockets. They just have massive burns that very hard, complicated to treat. And our story of humanitarian help, it's not a professional story. We're not a huge charity, it's the biggest charity in the world that been doing humanitarian aid. No, we are doctors. But since the first day we said, okay, we have to do something. We have to do at least something. And our something was call to our friends all over the world, to Australia, and ask them to give us help. Yes, money is important, but give us help. We need medicine. And if you cannot give medicine from Australia, because it's a long way, yes, send us support financially. And people, when they saw our transparency, they started to send us hundreds of kilograms and tons of medical support. And in the beginning, we were buying a lot of the stuff. But as people saw our transparency and accountability, they started to donate things. As those anesthetic machines, one anesthetic machine roughly cost $30,000, and all we had to do is to pay for some elements and logistic. The same here, donation from charity IHP. They offered it to us and they asked us to pay from London to Lviv, just $4,000, and it cost 10 million pounds. So it is fantastic, and I can tell you more and more stories how the help has been provided and how it was crucial. We have stories, thousands of stories, when those small things were so important, dressing, equipment, antibiotics, and we're trying to deliver to the most needed places. And as you can see, this hospital in Kharkiv was bombed, and just after that we delivered immediately help to them. Or this MRI, unfortunately you're not going to see it here, but the rocket trapped in the building, one of the building of hospital, and the straps, because straps from rocket, they're also destroying a lot of things, but they didn't trap in MRI machine. It's literally a miracle, a fantastic. This is a hospital, a wonderful, so strong woman. I'm telling you, man, sorry, but women are stronger, much more. And you can, yes, I see approve. I see support. And this is the same hospital in Kharkiv that we're trying to support all over the places. But we know our people, we know the brokenness, corruption, and we know how to give this help. And I'm telling you, if right now Russian propaganda is telling you Ukraine is corrupted, Russia is much more corrupted. And the whole world is corrupted. Breaking news. I may suggest Australia is a holy land, and no. But Africa is. We've been in Tanzania last year. It's horribly corrupted. So the question should be, not corrupted you're definitely corrupted, and if you're lying, you're not, that you're lying. The question should be how we, as a charity, as a government, that helping, that giving the help is going to control, is going to look for that. Because it's illusion that all people are good and no, people are good if you're going to help them to be accountable and open and responsible for the things that you're giving them. And we know that and we understand that and we don't trust. And that's why since almost the first day we counted, it's taken much more time, but medical help, it's much more responsible help than food and clothes. If you can weigh it on kilograms, you cannot like just say, oh, I need this antibiotic, this amount, this antibiotic, that amount, or roughly. No, you have to know the doses, the quantities, exactly sometimes disposable things, because as medical workers, some of you maybe know, but it's also complicated that you can overload medical hospital system. And you're not going to help, you're going to waste the help. Even syringes, we got more than 15 trucks of syringes. They're all different. And some of them, yeah, we need only 3 milliliters, like 15,000 syringes, 3 milliliters. Oh no, another hospital opposite. We have enough 3 milliliter syringes. We need 15 and so on and so on. And if you're going to have standard approach, it's not going to be effective. And we're trying to be effective and use the help that you give, other people give, other organizations in the best way. So we count, it's pretty hard, but we count every syringe, every tablet, every package. So it was important, and the people, organization, charities, hospitals, they would know. And these photos track me down from Mykolaiv Hospital after bombing our concentrator, helping to small kid to survive. And sometime I'm going to show, next photo is about numbers, statistic, and it's fantastic numbers. We became one of the biggest organizations that distribute more than 800 tons of medical help to hundreds. Right now those numbers are even more. Hospitals, military, charities, churches, village councils, hundreds, thousands of organizations. And people are forgetting about that. Unfortunately, those are million stores, because this all we distribute, and we know there's just small that we can do and we can help, and small pin of drop. But of course, we are talking about a lot about education, because help it's not enough. Help, if you're just going to give antibiotics or ultrasound, it's not enough. Many people, many doctors, they don't know how to use proper ultrasound. So we said, we're going to train you. And we created one of the best, really the best. It's not about me, I'm not a trainer. I can be proud about them. One of the best training group in Ukraine, more than 17 trainers that do this training, and other charities. So again, when you're doing something small in faithfulness, people will see it. And they said, okay, you're doing the training, we're going to buy equipment. And they bought us more than 200 ultrasound machines, and through education, we gave it distributed through among the different people, doctors. A scholarship program that we are doing, and we hope to do in Australian doctors, Educare. We said, okay, let's build a relationship, because all hospitals are open and want to help Ukraine, but let's do something. And we said, can you come to Ukraine? And they said, it's the middle of the world. Do you know what's going on in your country? So we said, so accept our doctors. And if you don't know, but such hospitals as Myhovych that belong to Harvard, their scholarship program are extremely expensive. And we were amazed that they agreed to accept our doctors for free. And it's a big applaud to doctors that accepted, because it's additional work, not paid, not placed, and not easy. But they train more than certain transplant, actually just certain transplant doctors for 3 months in one of the best clinics in the world. But not only that, other other hospital heard about that because it became really famous, and they were like, oh, we also want to help. And Yale Medical School and Johns Hopkins, Mayo Clinic, again, for those who are not in medical world, it's like top schools, medical school in the world. And we are amazed that people are really open and want to help, and it's crucial help, because those doctors, they will again treat with better knowledge, better education, thousands of people. But finally, people started to, some of the brave surgeons, especially plastic reconstructive, agreed to come to Ukraine, and they operated, and they learned something. Because the war that's going right now, it's absolutely different war that been in Afghanistan, Iran, and the trauma that's happening right now, it's unbelievable, complicated. Yeah, I forgot to mention sensitive content. I'm not so polite as Australian. Yeah, really, the difference between Ukrainian and other world, it's a little bit, we don't feel this sensitivity. Next time I'm going to change it. Yeah, those traumas, they are unbelievable. Not only our doctors sometimes don't know what to do with them. The best international doctors, they are just shaking hands and they don't know what to do with them. But because we are still fighting, we don't have other choice. We see that we can do it, we can change it. But we need your involvement. We need you. And the last our project, it's a training, save a life. We train civilians because right now every civilian has to know how to give first aid. Another day, it was a long time ago, but we trained one of the hair cutter dresser from Kharkiv. And you might think, why she had to know this first aid, stop bleeding information? But the rocket trap in the line that was standing for the water or food, and many people were injured, and she had the knowledge how to give this first aid. And I'm not telling you many needed stories how soldiers were calling us from the most hot place in the front line, and they were grateful because for some of them this knowledge was helpful. Some of them died because there was no other possibility to give help, but some of them survived because of this knowledge. Again, Lara already talked a little bit about tourniquets, and it's extremely important to have at least tourniquet. Otherwise, if you not have a tourniquet, the thing that is gonna stop the bleeding. If you don't have the tourniquet, you're gonna die. And many times it's Chinese cheap tourniquets, and it's bad. It's very bad. You're just gonna lose the blood, and in 15 minutes you're dead. But it's not enough just to give a tourniquet. When you're training, you have to train those people, because many times we have stories when soldiers in panic attack, in frustration, he put a tourniquet on his both hands here as high as possible, and turned out there is no injury. But evacuation is not very quickly. And for those of you who, again, don't have medical background, if you have a tourniquet on your limb more than 2 hours, and usually evacuation 6, 10, 17 hours because of massive fire, you will have a dead tissues, dead cells. And you cannot just do something with this tourniquet. You have to amputate the whole limb. You cannot save it. And many of them lost their limbs just because they were not educated enough. And this not about only about, they survive at least, but their whole life is totally different. They are longevity of life. But those soldiers are so brave, and they fighting not because they're brave. And we are fighting not because we are brave. Because sometimes it's so simple that what are you going to do? Where are you going to run? who's he going to protect? Because in the end of the day, we are still fighting alone with this evil, with Russia. But if you're going to help us, if you're going to be support for us, we're going to be able to win. And we saw it already. But we need really that world wake up and really started to be interested in the victory, in the finishing of the war. Not because we wanted, but because the world needed. This evil like disease. If you're not going to stop it, it's like infection. If you're not going to use antibiotics as soon as possible, it's going to affect all of your body. And it's going to infect others. So let's stop this disease. We have possibility. So please buy some things, necklace or other things, to your friends, to your family. Subscribe for small donations. As Lara mentioned, $100 per month, but it's a whole year. If we're going to sign and find people who are going to be passionate about that. And I know that sometimes you think it's far away and it's not going to touch you, but it's going to touch your children, your friends. Because yes, we are coming in difficult times, and this kind of conversations, it's hard to have. And none of politicians want to prepare his nation, his country for the war. But we hear it. We hear that if we're not going to do something, World War III is going to happen. Because it's like a scenario of how World War II was started. And right now we have opportunity to not have the same mistakes that we did in World War II, because the world was too afraid of aggressors, was too afraid of dictators. And if you have possibility to motivate your family, your neighbors, to understand this reality, it's not a pleasant reality. It's not something that easy to share. It's not something that you want to share, actually. But I'm telling you, it's something that we have to share. And if we're going to at least something doing, we will be able to win. Because I strongly believe in democracy and freedom. That's what we're fighting. Russia, they don't have any democracy, any freedom. And you cannot negotiate with terrorists. And I like President Zelensky quote, ask Prigozhin how to negotiate with Putin. Thank you so much for coming. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Any questions? Yeah, so go on.
How many doctors have you got in Ukraine as a head count?
Well, I don't know. Hundreds of, no, not hundreds, but thousands of doctors. We have, before the war, we had around 40 million population. It's the biggest country in Europe by territory. So you have a lot of people, doctors who will work in rural area. Yeah.
I know that.
I know that there's more than 1,000 hospitals that have been destroyed already. Less or more attack. So many doctors left the country because difficult situation. Many doctors under occupation. Yeah.
If there are medical staff like Allied Health who want to go for 3 months or 6 months, what is the process of getting there? Do you provide housing, food, even though they're volunteers, or how does the process work?
So, great question. And we are especially searching for surgeons because, yes, of course, mental health support, it's all of the kind of education is needed, but especially surgeons. Why? If you're not going to save the life, if you're not going to do a surgery, there's no mental support, rehabilitation, post-traumatic treatment. And right now we are in this stage when we are losing here a lot of people. And it's all about capacity of doing. Of course, if you can motivate someone to go to Ukraine, do it, but especially we are searching surgeons. And yes, we will take care or help in logistic communication with hospital. We know hundreds of hospitals that is really important to work. We don't have grants or finances to provide housing or logistic, but I'm telling you, it's much cheaper. Sometime, oh no, it's not better, but cheaper. One of you can ask Lara.
I can say, so in terms of self-funding, so Rudi's organisation will help you with all, the connections and the logistics and finding the right places for your skills to be used effectively. But sometimes they might find you a host family, or if you prefer, to stay in an apartment or something. It's actually not very expensive, so you can stay in places. It's very easy to self-fund in Ukraine. Food's dirt cheap and delicious, so that part's not hard. And I'm sure that most of us who would be in a position to go for 3 months would probably self-fund quite easily.
But when we're talking about surgery especially, it should not be long. We're talking about 1-2 weeks, not more, because we know that you have a work, surgeons have a work, and most of the time it's like a vacation, sacrifice, or additional vacation. So it's enough. You don't have to be all the time in the hospital, like for a long time. It's enough. 1-2 weeks is going to be enough for surgeons to operate, to find the most complicated cases. So doctors will practice together with foreign specialists.
So, and you can do this. So I know I've worked with Patsy. So she's a former director of allied health. So lots of allied health. So that like occupational therapy, physio, that sort of thing.
Yes.
So, and you have people that
Yes.
do that.
Yes.
as well.
Yes. Yes. But as always, one of our values is professionalism, and we're trying to use, and it's talking about the not easy way, but a better way, and we're going to always choose the better way. So it's kind of complicated sometimes when you have different specialists, but we want to use all capacity of each doctor, and we want to put them in the best place so they can use their best skills. If it's a compassionate doctor, it's going to be with one of Australian doctors that are going to go in 2-3 months to Ukraine, and to spend the time and training and teaching in the places where it's going to use the best way. Sometimes it's doing something practical together as surgeons, operations. Sometimes it's lecturing. Sometimes it's some master classes as an anesthesiologist. So it's all the time different. The biggest question is like, do you want to do something?
Major prayer points for you.
Prayer?
Prayer.
Good question. And there are so many things to pray about because it's tough. It's really, really tough. And when people asking like, do you believe in the victory or how Ukraine is going to win? It definitely should be a miracle. It is still miracles that we're standing. Because of media silence, you quite don't understand how war is big and massive in Ukraine. And if you're going to compare it to Gaza, Israel even, Gaza, we heard last week in Canberra protests, they lost around 28,000 people, and it's horrible. Every life is valuable, I believe in it. But only in one Mariupol we lost around, we don't know the numbers, but roughly from 20 to 40,000 civilians. One city. And there are many cities that we cannot detach because it's fire there, just constant bombing. And if Israel army is fighting with terrorists that hiding behind civilians, we are fighting with real army that you're using everything what they have, and even more. They asking North Korea, Iran, China to help them. And they are helping. Russia or Soviet Union was preparing for Cold War for the dozens of years, and they gathered millions of artillery, bombs, and means to kill people, and they all using it right now in Ukraine. And for some of them rockets, they are empty. They don't have it anymore because they all spend it in Ukraine. Russia already producing 3-4 million artillery shells per year. To understand how much it is, US that spend around $1 trillion for their military budget produce 28,000 artillery shells per month. It's roughly 300,000 for all. And some of that is given to Ukraine. France, big wealthy country, promised to Ukraine 3,000 artillery shells per month. Those 3,000 can be used in half of the day. So, and roughly, if God help us, Europe is gonna start producing more. By end of 2024, they're gonna give us 1 million shells. So, it's 30% that Russia producing by itself without Iran, North Korea. So when you're asking what is pray about, the miracles still continue because I cannot explain. I just barely can understand how we still can stand and even made some success. It's not a jokes, it's not a games, and they're playing big because they are losing the face. They are losing some people that they don't care about because it's alcoholic prisoners, and we are losing the best people. And so we definitely need victory, or peace, better to say. But peace without victory is impossible. And pray about children because it's really painful. Because they definitely, my son today, his birthday, and he woke up because he heard explosions near our house, and our house near 1 hour from Poland border. And I was happy that when he was 1 year old when the war started, because he's not going to recognize, and it's very hard to explain why we have to go to shelters to 5, 6, 7-year-old, because some of the people want to kill you. Why? Because they think you're Nazis, because they think you're wrong. They think that you should be fixed somehow. And yes, they definitely going to be different children, and they're going to grow up faster. Some of them horribly lost their parents. I know the story when 2 boys, they covered in the grave in the European because they were with their parents, dead parents, more than a week. So they decided to dig a grave and put those parents. And there's much more horrible stories that we can even imagine. So yeah, pray about those things, because I believe we cannot do this. Only miracle, only God can fix it.
Have you had much success in recruiting?
Doctors? Yes, we'll see. Many people are open, but still their wives are not so much happy. And it's still like, as I said, you should have some kind of bravery to go. It's safe. We have already more than 10 teams, different, that have been doing a lot of the job, and people are coming. And Lara, she can approve you that it's absolutely okay to travel. Safety issues, it's another question or conversation, but you still have to be brave. And people are all polite. They of course they want to help, but we'll see how deeds are going to show it up.
Many people speak English, so when you go,
Mm-hmm.
there's a communication. Is there communication?
No, unfortunately, if you're talking about civilians, there's not a lot of people who speak English, but if you're talking about hospitals, and we especially choosing the hospitals when doctors can speak English, we are putting those teams there because, effect from this trip is going to be very low if they will use all the time translator. We add in translator so those doctors can communicate, but most of the time those Ukrainian doctors, they know English. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So hopefully you're glad you made the effort to come tonight. And as I mentioned, we have privilege of having this videoed for us tonight. Thank you, Simon. So if anyone wants to find out how to get a copy to share with people, grab one of the brochures that's floating around, and you can email me on that email there. And just tell me you want a copy or want to follow up on that. So thank you very much. And I think we do need to vacate here in a little bit, but we do have have a bit of time. So if you want to hang around and ask Rudi some questions that are more one-on-one, or have a chat, or talk to me, or whatever, have a look at some earrings, or please feel free. Thank you.